Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Letters to Tahira. Tahira K. Nam Khatud. By G. A. Parwez. Translated by Mrs. Suraiya Alvi. Chapter 8-9. 8 Letter to Tahira. Child's upbringing. Tahira, you are so naive. You are surprised over Sida, who is about to be 20 and still talks like child. This means that you think that a child's mind becomes mature as his or her body grows with age. This notion is absolutely wrong and against the facts. If the mind, too, matures automatically like the body, then our society would be of a different nature. Altogether, all the troubles that you see in the world are mostly due to the people whose bodies have matured, but their minds are still immature. The world would still be safe if with the mind. The body, too, remains like that of a child, because if a child's mind is immature, then his bodily strength and its potential of wielding power is quite limited, too. He then cannot cause much destruction and bloodshed. But just think. If a body has the strength of a young man and we, considering him to be an adult, give all the responsibilities in his care although mentally he is immature, then what would the result be? Body and mind. The result would be the same which you saw in the movie Frankenstein. The body of a giant and the brain of a madman, with the difference that in this case everybody considered that he was really mad. But nobody considered a young man with an immature mind as mad. He is considered to be a fully conscious and a rational person. With this thought in mind, he is given important responsibilities. Afterwards, when he behaves like a child, we get upset. This condition is the first spark that disturbs our peace of mind and tranquility. This then leads to difference of opinion, which develops into conflicts, and conflict develops into strife. That child with a mature body neither wants to change his position, nor does he want to change his attitude. In fact, changing his attitude is something he cannot do. If we have given him powers which we cannot easily withdraw, then our helplessness poisons our whole system. We sulk and cannot do anything about it. But if we, too, have equal power, a head-on collision occurs, which then makes our society a hell. Consequently, this state of affairs turns itself into a world war. These day-to-day conflicts, feuds, riots and acts of barbarism, what else are they other than the outcome of the same mature body having an immature mind? If a child keeps on getting proper food, then his body develops on its own, but we forget that the mind does not automatically develop along with the body. A lot of hard work is needed to nurture a mind. It requires special attention towards the education of the child. Dear Tahira, this is the reason why I keep on telling this to you, although sometimes I do feel that you may be minding my repetition. Education of the child. But this is of such importance, that I will keep on repeating that you do a lot to look after Javed's bodily needs. May God keep him safe from all evil. But you do not do much to train his mind. At the most you will say, I do not let him play with bad-mannered children. This is true, he would be saved from developing bad habits. But do you believe that if a child does not get bad habits, he instinctively develops good habits? You may not admit it, but I think you believe that if a child is being kept away from bad habits, then the development of his head and heart would take place quite instinctively. And that way he would become the embodiment of all the good habits in the world. This is a wrong notion. I have written in detail about instinct in one of the letters to Salim. Ref. Parwez, G. A. Letters to Salim, 17th letter. Perhaps you have read that letter. Since it was somewhat philosophical, you might not have understood it fully. Let me make you understand the same in another way. You have observed other children, but Javed's each and every antic must be fixed and vivid in your mind. Just think over the fact that when, after his birth, he was still oblivious of the world around him, what was his nature? He was an absolute goof. Ignorant of everything. Child's nature. He had as much knowledge as, for example, a goat's kid has. It sucks milk when hungry and then goes off to sleep. It starts bleeding if the milk is delayed. Even one stage forward, when the child starts flailing his arms and legs, he still falls short of knowledge, when compared to a kid. A kid would die of hunger but would not touch a heap of green chilies lying nearby. But a child would put a chili in his mouth if he could lay his hand upon it, or for that matter anything that he could get. A piece of rock salt, or earth, or ashes, or lime, or coal, you name it and he will put it in his mouth. Do you remember your son swallowing that coin? What a predicament we all were in, including he himself. Have you ever seen a kid swallowing a coin? Our worries increase when the child becomes a toddler. He will touch fire, and if you save him from there, then he will plunge into the water tub. It was just that God wanted him to live and be a source of pleasure to us. However, Ronnie saw him otherwise. My daughter, I do not want to repeat the bygone. May God save everybody from unheard of troubles. A step ahead. When he learns to walk and run, he runs into trouble all the more. He would either himself fall off the terrace or shove his friend off. Whatever he lays his hands upon, he throws. Like breaking this saucer or that cup. The moment he sees anything in somebody's hand, he attempts to snatch it. If that person does not want to part with it, then he is in for a bite with from the child's teeth or scratches from his nails. That sweeper's as a son could barely save his eye. Destroying, snatching, beating, slapping, is a child's nature which he does not learn from anybody. It oozes out of him by itself. Psychologically a child is quite jealous. You often write in your letters that poor little baby is quite often slapped by Javed. It is the same emotion of jealousy at work. Before the baby girl was born, Javed was the sole recipient of everybody's love. There was nobody sharing it. With the arrival of the new baby, he had to share his domain. Now he wants to expel the poor girl from her limelight. A child wants to be the sole center of everybody's attention. He wants to remain self-centered. Now you will see that when the little girl grows up, she would generally remain unwell. Do you know why such a thing should happen? She would not be able to compete with Javed in strength, therefore she will remain weak and sick to get everybody's attention. The same emotion of being self-centered manifests itself. This is, dear Tahira, the pattern of a human child which has been sheltered from surrounding influences and has been left to grow by itself. You say that you are very careful not to let Javed play with ill-mannered children so that he may not pick bad habits. I say, even if you bring up your child in a thermos flask, he would still have those habits I have mentioned above. Are these any less bad habits? Now just think. If these children are saved, according to you, from bad habits and they grow up with the above-mentioned mentality, what kind of young men would they make for our society? I do not think any other word than criminal fits this description. Dear daughter, these are the people who generally make up our society. Those adults, men and women, whose bodies have matured with age but whose mentality, or mind, is like children. Out of these a few grab the chair to power. Some grace the religious cushions. Some meddle with commerce, some dominate the industrial centers, some become the law formulators, some become the admirers of posterity, and the world starts taking them as heroes and leaders. Whereas generally they are the same. With an adult body and an immature mind. An adult body with a mature mind is a rarity. You will also say that we do not leave our children as they are. We educate them. But just think what kind of education we give them. It is generally taken for granted that a child's education begins when we send him to school. But this is wrong. A child has learned many things by that age. Do you notice that Javed speaks a language which you speak at home and the neighbor's child speaks the language of his home? You have never made Javed sit with a book and table to learn Urdu. He has learned your Urdu without being taught. Do you believe that when he was quietly picking up the Urdu language, he was not learning anything else? He was in fact subtly learning all the things happening at your home day and night. This was the education which he had acquired before going to school. And the main portion of this education consisted of what you call ethics and beliefs. Animals do not have moral laws. Humans are the only ones who have this distinction. But just think, Tahira, what is the basis of this significant distinction? Of course, it is this education which is subtly absorbed by the child. As I have written to you in an earlier letter of mine. A Jain child would vomit even to think of meat, while a Muslim child sucks at a bone like his mother's milk. A Hindu shudders to think of beef, but a Muslim thinks that the tastiest kebabs are made with beef. People consider it a sin even to kill an ant in our houses, but a thug would not think much of murdering a human. This is the basic education which a child acquires before he goes to school. What kind of education do these schools impart? Before you think about it, bring to your mind your earlier letter in which you had written that although you take great care of Javed's food, he is not getting the corresponding strength and vigor. I had told you that you give him everything he wants to eat, but do you ever care whether he digests and absorbs it or not? If the food is not absorbed by the body, then it could be harmful rather than beneficial. The same is true of our education, too. Our educational system renders information to the children but disregards the fact whether it can become a part of their character or not. Character building is not done by our educational system. It only renders information. Therefore, our young people tend to present a personality which consists of an able body, grown up according to age, with a child's mind and carrying a whole load of information. Now it is obvious how a young man with this mentality uses his power and wealth in the same way he would use his stored information which has been loaded onto him in schools and colleges. Now upon analyzing this young man's personality, what you will find is as follows. Age-wise, by our estimate, a mature person, ready to shoulder all kinds of responsibilities. 2. Mind-wise, like a child who just does not know what a responsibility is. 3. Education-wise, like a porter at a station who carries a lot of load but owns nothing of it. 4. Beliefs and concepts which he has unconsciously acquired at home, but which does not understand and cannot defend by reason or argument. Such concepts are harmful, instead of being useful. This reason is that these concepts neither come out of the depth of heart, nor grow in a rational mind. He remains unconsciously faithful to them. And whenever he is confronted with the realities of life or arguments that do not tally with them, he at once takes off his mask and abhors them or revolts against them. If he is not courageous enough to show his revolt openly, then he becomes bigoted. His heart turns into a permanent beat of hypocrisy, whose destructive consequences can be quite far-reaching. Mother's duties. Tahira, I hope now you understand what responsibilities the mother of a child has to shoulder. I doubt if those mothers who get a tin of powdered milk for his food, hire an uncouth hand to look after, and send him to a nursery school for education, would be able to understand these responsibilities. As for themselves, they whisk off to the clubs, on the plea that they come to kill their unoccupied time. Or else, in line with the latest mood, enroll themselves as a member of some social welfare society and start lecturing about the moral degradation of the nation. A dutiful mother of even one child has so much to do about her child's caring, training and education that she just cannot spare any time to attend to anything else. When the Quran enjoined that according to natural division of labor, breadwinning is the responsibility of the man, and it is his duty to ensure that all his wife's needs are fulfilled, it did not mean that the woman was reduced into a handicapped person or a financial slave of the man. It said this because it knew that a conscientious mother would have no time to earn her bread. Therefore, my daughter, you have to watch it daily that his mind and body develop at the same pace. If it is not happening this way, then be assured that when he grows up he would be a problem for himself and a terror to the society. Remember, a human child has countless potentialities and there is no limit for their fulfillment. If we keep on nourishing them, then they shall keep on developing throughout the life. Just imagine, if a child's potential capabilities remain suppressed, who knows what priceless gem society is deprived of? Immature mind. Now you will ask, how do we know that so and so man or woman has an immature mind? It is not very difficult to find out. 1. When you see somebody solving a problem like children, then surmise that he has a child's mind in an adult body. If you look at it from this angle, you will find that men and women whom you consider adults are in fact children. They are the same children who cause a large number of social problems in the society. 2. If you see a man or woman who feels quite satisfied that at a certain age he or she has required enough knowledge and does not need any more, then, 2. Surmise that mentally that person is child. A child, at every stage, considers his knowledge complete. 3. A child is unaware of law and does not want to be restricted. Law does not mean the law of a court. This law defines that every human act has a certain consequence. In English they call it what follows what. In the terminology of the Quran it is called the law of retribution. In this world it is the method to arrive at true conclusions. It is generally known as the scientific method. A child does not know this method. He does not know what the consequences of his action would be. That is why there is no logical sequence in his discussions and no organization in his actions. If you observe the same phenomenon in an adult, then surmise that he has involuntarily grown up chronologically age-wise, but mentally he is far behind. 4. Human beings are defined as rational animals. Rational means one having ratio, and ratio means correct proportion and balance. Therefore, human quality should be that anything you say or do, should carry correct proportion and have balance. A child has no notion of proportion or balance. Hence whenever you see a man or woman whose life does not express proportion and balance, this person would mentally be a child. 5. You must have observed when you talk to some people, that after listening carefully for 2 or 3 minutes, they will be fed up and start looking here and there. They would be wishing for the topic to end and would want another interesting one to start. It is not that the subject does not hold interest for them after 2 or 3 minutes, or that it is not beneficial to them. The subject was just as interesting and beneficial to them, but is just that their span of attention is so short that they cannot concentrate on anything for long. You will watch that they never finish any work. Today they start something and get so absorbed in it that onlookers would think that they would even miss a meal to finish it. But after 2 or 3 days, it is observed that they have left that work unfinished and are pursuing something else. They spend their whole life without success and without achieving anything. If you see their varied occupations, some here, some there, one half done, another 3/4 done, but none complete. Sometimes they have fine ability and you can see their special skill in their work, but their disposition is such that they cannot complete any program. Be quite sure that this aged person is an aged minor. Absolutely like a child, because children cannot concentrate on one thing for long. One moment they are doing one thing, next they are indulging in something else. 1 minute they are playing one game, after some time, another. If along with the body the mind does not mature, he will manifest this trend all his life. Here do understand one more thing. It is not necessary that all of a person's mental faculties would have remained immature. It is possible that one of his faculties may have become matured while another one may still be immature. This type of people are all the more difficult to handle. On seeing their mature faculty, people liken them for mature persons, but when their immaturity is revealed in other aspects of life, then one is at one's wit's end as to what to say or take them for. 6. You must have seen children who cry themselves hoarse when their clay toy horses break, but if somebody brings a balloon for them, they start jumping with joy. Their measures of happiness and sadness are quite small. It is the same with those who are immature in mind. Anything, however slight, that goes against them or they imagine to be so, is enough to make them feel the sky has fallen. They are gloomy themselves and make others sad, too. The slightest pretext is enough to bring them to tears. On the other hand, the smallest good news makes them jubilant. If you do not behave like them, then they accuse you of being jealous. 7. Children are known for their imbalance when taking revenge. If they become cross with anybody, they attack with full force. They do not realize the proportion between the crime and punishment. To them, punishment means just satisfying their feelings of revenge, and that is all. The same is the case of those elders with immature minds. They do not have a sense of justice. That is the ratio between crime and punishment. This is generally known as regal disposition. When they wield power, then whoever differs from them even slightly, they would crush that person with all their might. They do not do justice, they just take their revenge. They feel very happy and proud over the discomfiture of their opponent, just like how a child feels triumphant when he has pushed his adversary away. 8. Another childish trait is like that a child for whom, even if has 10 toys but sees another child having something that he does not have, having the 10 toys would be of no satisfaction. He would either want to possess it, or to get another one just like that. The elders with immature minds also display the same behavior. They are never satisfied with what they possess and are always hankering after those things which they do not have, regardless of whether they need them or not. Since in our present times we have a majority of such minor elders, the businessmen trading with them take advantage of this childishness. Through advertisements, these children are being told that they do not have this or that. That is how the bazaar remains humming, due mostly to them. Today very few things are bought because they are needed. Most of the things bought are these about which advertisements give you a feeling that you don't have this or you do not have that. You Tahira. Bring to your mind the homes of your friends and see how many things they have which they have never used even once. These things remain lying in their boxes and drawers. Just like how Javed keeps his multicolored glasses and ceramic pieces. A rusty iron bar, a cap's tassel, an empty cigarette pack, a peacock feather, slate, pencil, a piece of crayon, scraps of paper and a dried sunflower in an empty shoebox. So carefully, and then he forgets all about where he might have kept them. And then starts collecting his precious property all over again. The above-mentioned qualities precisely highlight an immature mind. Those who do not grow mentally, with age, retain these qualities. And as I have written before, this phenomenon makes life difficult for both him and the society. But the hardest part is to bring about a change when you are grown up, because subconsciously we derive pleasure from this irresponsible attitude. A child's training ground. That is why we call our childhood the best part of our life and keep nursing a wish in our hearts for the recurring of those lovely days. Therefore, a person can be best trained in his childhood, and the best training ground is the home of the child. Homes that care for children's training from this viewpoint produce confident, responsible, sympathetic, loving, sacrificing, courageous and generous children. In those homes that do not impart good training, the child is made to depend upon others, which results in his lack of confidence. Alternately, he becomes so terrified due to frequent scolding that he cannot develop courage and truthfulness. In other places, if he is the apple of his mother's eye, then he is deprived of his masculinity, or if he is the father's pet, then he cannot comprehend the finer points of life. Sometimes uncertainties and fear of the loss of father's job or the vacating of a house, makes him a slave of economics right from childhood. In other cases all his demands are catered to, and he has been made to think that fulfillment of his material needs is the only aim of life. Some homes tell the child that his father and his home are the best, thus making him prejudiced against color, creed, and country. In other places he is told that nothing in the world is good, so he becomes pessimistic and despairing about the future. At times too many instructions too often kill his initiative and he behaves like a machine. Some leave the child absolutely free, so he is unable to respect the law. At times unwholesome surroundings can kill his fine sentiments for appreciating beauty. Sometimes he is made aware, through such remarks, that playing with other children would soil his clothes, and he comes to hate others and starts indulging in self-praise. At other times he is told not to criticize or censor the ancestors, it would be wrong. This turns him into a dumb, driven sheep. At times, an instruction like, whenever you have to decide about problems, just consult your heart, is tantamount to throwing permanent values, revelation, and solid principles to the winds. You must have seen from this, Tahira, that a house plays such an important role in molding the character of people. The kind of nation you will be is determined by the kind of homes you have had. All this would make you understand what the responsibilities of a mother are. In Iqbal's words, she builds the character of nations. That is why the word in Arabic has been derived from which means mother. At birth a child is absolutely raw material. The mother molds him by giving knowledge. He is dumb. The mother makes him talk, gives him language. Mother tongue. He is quite irresponsible. The mother makes him learn to be responsible. He is quite selfish. The mother persuades him to love his brothers and sisters, and be sympathetic to others. He sees everything in parts. The mother shows him to view the whole. The child is only like molding clay at birth, and a mother can mold him any way she wants. This, my dear girl, are your responsibilities. These are responsibilities which you have been asked to shoulder by humanity. May God give you strength to be able to fulfill these responsibilities successfully. So that you should be able to say it proudly that you have added somebody to the teeming millions of the world of whom humanity would be proud. It is impossible to achieve this without the help of the Quranic guidance, because humanity could only be achieved within its framework. Parwez, December 1954. Ninth letter to Tahira. Regarding veil. Tahira, you were right when you said, according to 228. The responsibilities of women correspond to their rights. Unfortunately, this verse has been reduced to recitation only. In reality, what is happening is that all rights belong to the men, and all responsibilities have been assigned to women. So much so that honorable lie is demanded of women only and not of men. If ever a rumor about a girl spreads, she is branded for life and no respectable family would accept her. However, when these same respectable families start talking the marriage of their son, then this is generally how the boy's mother would complain to his father. How long will you let this boy loiter? I had been telling you that all is not well. He is becoming a loafer and has started keeping bad company. But you do not listen to me. Now he has started staying out late and sowing his wild oats. Do get him settled somewhere. After all, how long will you keep on merely thinking about it? This is to say that if a boy sows his wild oats, it is not counted as being a serious problem, but any slight suspicion or misunderstanding about a girl is enough to wreck her life. This is her pre-marriage vulnerability. What about after her marriage? If a husband learns that his wife had stepped out of the house without his permission, even if she might have gone to visit her parents, this could be considered a crime serious enough for her to qualify for a divorce, or to earn a bad reputation for herself. On the other hand, if a man becomes openly wayward, his name does not get tarnished. Therefore, in a society where purity is demanded of women only, and men are exempted, it is useless to talk about women's rights and privileges or responsibilities, which are the attributes of the equality demanded by the Quran. Quranic demands. According to the Quran, the purity of body and soul, which is the hallmark of humans, is equally demanded from both men and women. If keeping herself chaste is the responsibility of the woman, then she has the right to demand this from the men as well. Just as it is incumbent on the woman to keep herself chaste. 24. 31. It has also been made obligatory for men to keep themselves chaste. 24. 30. In fact, men have been addressed first and women afterwards. When the Quran tells a woman to be chaste, in the same manner it asks men to be unsullied. 33. 35. Just as a lapse in this respect makes a woman a criminal, so does it make the man a criminal. Even their punishment is same. Whip each man or woman sex offender with 100 lashes. 24. 2. I do hope that you now understand that Quranic society demands both men and women to be chaste, as well as the responsibilities of women correspond to their rights. 2. 228. Which is the practice of women's equal rights with equal responsibilities. Problem of veil. Now comes your main query. I am not very surprised at the query, rather why you were late in making it. Why didn't you ask about it in your first letter? Nowadays there is no other more important question for women, than that of the veil. Almost 90% of all the inquiries that I receive from women are about the veil. Leaving aside the exceptions. They do not ask what the Quran says about it, but rather they want to know how their adopted style can be justified through the Quran and explained as confirming to Islam. But I know that this is not the motive of your inquiry. I do not know at which blessed moment our late brother proposed your name as Tahira, but you have certainly been amply bestowed with the purity of head and heart. The nation can never feel proud enough of daughters like you. In fact, people can never envy enough the families that bring forth such leading lights, which are like an alcove not lit by a lamp, but which is bright, sparkling and soothed by the early morning light. A lamp that has been put in a crystal clear glass chandelier remains safe from outer influences. That chandelier looks like a star that is giving off streams of light, making the whole house shining bright. 24. 35. House imprisonment. First of all, Tahira, do understand seclusion. House arrest is a punishment that Quran suggests for women who are inclined towards seduction. They need not have seduced anybody, but their actions may have been suggestive. Therefore, Surah An-Nisa says, the women whose antics are suggestive of seduction, and if there are 4 people who as witnesses can claim so, should be put under house arrest until they die, or until the law of God shows them a positive alternative. 4. 15. From this you should note that house arrest is a punishment for vagrant women. As such, our customary seclusion for women is not only against the tenets of the Quran but is a crime. Since the illegal detention of innocent people is a crime against the law of the land, as well as of Islam. It is said that women are not being detained in their houses against their will, and that they are doing so because of their disposition, and out of modesty and shyness. How self-deceptive this argument is. We bring up and train our daughters in such a way that, like a caged bird, they get used to these restrictions. Then we present this lifestyle as what they are used to, and the nature of their disposition is advanced as argument to justify this imprisonment for life. A secondary problem. Incidentally, the above verse from Surah An-Nisa also reminds us of something else. Its mention would be of benefit. A few days ago a non-Muslim member of our legislative assembly objected to the Quranic system which specified the punishment for zina, sex out of wedlock, as 100 lashes. This made our Muslim members very embarrassed and crestfallen, so much so that it was within their power they would, God forbid, cross out the verse ordering such a barbaric punishment. Then they would triumphantly answer the objector that these orders belong to older times, and that the new edition of the Quran which they have printed, does not contain any such barbaric order belonging to the Dark Ages. But this, these poor dears could not possibly do, and thus they countered by saying that the Quran has put the condition that 4 eyewitnesses should prove the crime. That is, 4 witnesses who could testify the action had been performed. Since it is impossible to get 4 such eyewitnesses, because leaving illegal action alone, even legally nobody can perform such an act in the presence of other people. According to the Quranic code of law you cannot prove zina, and as such the people involved cannot be served such a barbaric punishment. Saying this must have made our Muslim members very happy, in that they had been able to save the Quran from such a great objection. Now who will tell these enemies of knowledge that in trying to save the Quran they had presented God, the lawmaker, as a laughing stock of the world. Perhaps they are not to be blamed, as it is the translation which reads as such. That for the women who commit the crime of zina, their cases should have 4 witnesses, and only then can this punishment is served. As I have written above, this verse is not for zina but for immodest behavior, which can eventually lead to zina. Anyway, this was a digression. Let us come back to the main topic. We have seen that according to the Quran, keeping women confined inside their houses is a crime. Therefore such a seclusion cannot be Quranic. As discussed in my first letter, according to the Quran the division of labor applies to the duties of men and women in life. Man's duty is to earn the bread, and the woman's is to raise and train the children. It is thus obvious that a man's circle of activity would mostly be outside the house, while a woman's is inside. Going contrary to this generally tells of the improper division of duties. That is why we say of a useless and unemployed man, that he sits at home like women. This principle implies the fact that a woman's station is generally at home, and that she should go out when she needs to. In the same way a man's activities are outside the house, and he comes home when the need demands. That is why it was enjoined upon women. Tell them that their station is in their home. 33. So generally they should be staying at home. This verse, however, was revealed about the worthy wives of the Messenger of God. Peace be upon him. And it has been said about them that they are not like ordinary women. Nevertheless the verse formulates the principle that the center of a woman's duty is her home. It is a fact that home plays a vital role in human life. Home here does not mean a house of brick and mortar, or a kitchen. In fact it encompasses a pleasant atmosphere and peaceful surroundings which are conducive to the development of the finer sentiments and for the rearing and education of the coming generations. It should be a proper center for training children, which is specifically under the charge of a woman. This is what is meant when we call a home a station. The above explanations highlight 2 things. 1. Keeping women confined in houses and forbidding them to go out is a punishment according to the Quran. It is not Quranic modesty. 2. A woman's station is her home. Now the question arises as to the manner of her staying at home, and her mode of moving about outside the house. The Quran gives instructions for both situations, but before I state these Quranic guidelines I want to emphasize that purity of thought and deed is a must for both men and women. The cultivation of a sterling character is the most important prerequisite for becoming a mu'min. Carelessness to unsullied character not only spoils one's personal integrity, but is also detrimental to national culture and civilization. The mode of education professed by the Quran does not stop at assigning punishment for such crimes, but wants to eradicate the circumstances and reasons due to which these are committed. It does not wait for the thief to commit theft and then pounce upon him. Rather it wants to block and guard all those alleys and lanes which can influence the thief. To put it in another way, rather than killing the thief, it kills the mother. The source. So that no thief is born. It has also adopted the same stance for the protection of chastity. It has assigned a punishment for zina and for the wrong accusation against innocent women, but along with this it suggests preventive ways and means. Since the subject has come to the fore, I should explain it in more details. The customary standing on ceremony, or shyness, should not obstruct the way, because these formal man-made barriers tend to obscure the truth. There are many types of physical actions such as breathing, on which the very life depends. Breathing is not dependent upon your intentions, and you do not have to do anything consciously to satisfy it. Even when one is awake, sleeping, sitting, walking, or doing anything or thinking of something, breathing automatically continues. One need not determine it, or do something about it, and stopping it needs some effort. Another physical urge is that of eating and drinking. This, too, does not depend upon your thinking or determination. When there is nothing in the stomach, you feel hungry. As your hunger increases, it becomes the center of your attention. but if you are deeply absorbed in your thoughts you forget your hunger. However, when its severity increases, it attracts your attention despite your being deep in thought. This urge makes itself felt, or becomes apparent, without any thought or intent. The third urge is sexual. Unlike the urge to breathe or eat and drink, it does not awaken on its own. It has to be awakened by conscious thought and intention. If a person is absorbed in work and is quite unaware of his surroundings, his breathing would continue on its own. He will also feel hungry automatically. In the beginning he may not attend to his hunger, but after some time this urge will force him to respond. On the other hand, the sexual urge would never raise its head and draw attention if one is absorbed in work. The awakening of this urge depends upon thought and intention. To preserve the purity of character, the Quran does not let such instances happen whereupon human thought and attention can excite this urge. This is that important point around which revolves the whole question of modesty. If unacquainted men and women behave in a manner which reverts them to sexual urges, then such actions are worth stopping. If you can achieve a state in which such situations do not occur, then this is how the Quran wants your society to be. After this discussion on the principle, let us now see how the Quran tackles it. First, let us consider life inside the home. The Quran stresses the sanctity of the home. Hence it orders, if you go to somebody's house, seek their permission to enter. When allowed, greet them and wish them peace. If nobody responds from within, never step in. If they want to be excused, then come back immediately. 24. 27 to 28. Then the Quran says that you are being taught this social etiquette so that its observance would make you better human beings. In the same context it was said, if you have to borrow something, even if it be from the house of the Messenger of God peace be upon him, then ask for it from behind a curtain. 33. 53. It was then said that this would be conducive to unsullied sentiments between you and the women inside the house. Along with the above, it is also instructed that if an unknown man calls from outside, the women within should not remain quiet like dumb people. They should respond in a proper way but not in an enticing voice that would bring out the worst in a man. It should not be out of context either. All what should be done is essential and proper talk which should fulfill the need of the moment, and not be seductive and enticingly attractive. 33. 32. This should be followed not only in talk but in their style of walking, too. A Persian couplet reads, love is not awakened by talk only, sometimes this fire also gets kindled by a walk. Therefore, while walking on the floor you should not strike your feet in a manner that the jingle of your ornaments can attract the attention of the opposite sex. 24. 32. Do you see, Tahira, how the Quran asks you to adopt a manner which does not direct a person's thoughts towards sex? All this refers to men outside the house. Now let us turn to the inside of homes. In this context, you should know that the Quran does allow all kinds of makeup and adornment. According to it, this adornment is for enhancing beauty in human life. Therefore no one has a right to ban them. Display of adornment. The display of adornment, however, is allowed in front of a husband only, or in front of those whose thoughts would not turn towards sex by it. Therefore it was ordered, do not display your adornment except in front of your husbands, your fathers-in-law, your sons, your husband's sons, your brothers and their sons, your sister's sons, your male, female servants who were still working inside the house, in front of the old men servants who are no longer interested in sex, and those children who are not yet aware of sex. 24:31. These instructions are given so that you can lead a prosperous and successful life, and in which the positive efforts of your society can bear fruit. The Quran is so particular that instructions about servants and children are also given. When they want to come to your room before you rise in the morning, or when you are resting, or at night, they should get your permission. 24:58. In this context you should keep in mind that verse 24:31 instructs you not to reveal your adornment even in front of women whom you do not know, as they, too, could cause some kind of mishaps. Outside house. Now let us step outside the house. As written earlier, keeping women confined within the four walls of the house is a punishment. As such, there is not harm in going out when needed. When women go out, men are bound to be present, and therefore, before saying anything to women, the Quran addresses men and says, "There are women walking about, so do not stare at them. Keep your eyes downcast." 24:30 In Surah An-Nur the Quran says, Momin men should be asked to keep their gazes usually lowered when walking out, and to not let them become wild. 24:30 This is a prerequisite to remaining chaste. As you know, being chaste is the basic quality of a momin. Just as eyes bring out the messages from within, they also carry the messages inwards, too. That is why they should be kept under check, as this would nourish the better strains in them. However, do tell them that this order is not to be observed mechanically, but one should be aware of the higher motives for which one has been asked to keep the eyes in check. Remember, God fully knows what you do mechanically. 24:30 After taking all these precautionary measures, women have been told that they could come out. But how? Tell Momin women to generally keep their eyes downcast, and not to let their eyes become immodest. 24:30 This is how a society would remain chaste. Till here the rule is the same for men and women. But more was needed for women, hence the Quran directs, "You do not display your adornments except those parts of the body that remain exposed inevitably. They should spread their headgear on their chests." 24:31 In another place it is said, "They should gather their jalbab and keep it near them." 33:59 Jalbab is a cloth that is worn over one's clothes when going out. It is thus obvious that whether you cover your chest with your headgear, or whether you wear something over your clothes, there is no mention of hiding your face. If concealing the face had been necessary, then why were men directed to keep the eyes downcast? It may be objected, that when it is directed that zinat be concealed, then as the face is the more prominent place of beauty, it should be hidden first. However, the Quran itself enjoins, "Cover your adornments except those parts which remain open inevitably." 24:30 And it then describes methods of covering which leave the face exposed. As such, hiding the face cannot be a Quranic tenet. I would like to make it clear that the Quran has mentioned kamar and jalbab because these were prevalent among Arabs at that time. It is not necessary for us to wear the jalbab and kamar or similar coverings. The Quranic aim is to conceal your adornments when going out. For this purpose we can wear what we like. The cut and style of the dress is dictated by your social mode, which keeps on changing with time. The main purpose is to adhere to the Quranic goal of hiding your adornment. Showing off. The above was in answer to the question on how women should go out. The Quran also explained the aim of the style of walk and talk. The purpose is this. Tell them that they should not exhibit their beauty and adornment around like it was being done in the Dark Ages. 33:33 It shows that tabarruj was indulged in during Dark Ages, and the Quran forbade it. Tabarruj derives from burj, which means a tower. To raise something, or to surface, or to show off. Contrary to this, is haya, modesty, which means to shrink. Tabarruj thus means showing off, and modesty implies of shrinking. The Quran forbids showing off, and advises modesty. Therefore any style that highlights and shows off beauty, or any exhibitionism, is against the tenets of the Quran. Also remember that whatever is plausible outside the house, is admissible inside, too, particularly with regard to unrelated men other than those which have been mentioned above in 24:31. Your adornment has to remain concealed. Women are not forbidden to sit with men inside the house, but the same conditions that apply for going out would apply here, too. Permission to see each other. Let us consider those necessary situations in which men and women are not forbidden from each other. The Quran, in keeping with its general principle of educating, does not fix any details. The details are left to human intellect and circumstances, although it is quite clear in the Quran that you are allowed to choose your spouse. In respect of nikah, marriage, the Quran explained itself. Whichever among women you like, you could marry them. 4. 3. It stated about the Nabi, peace be upon him, that he could not marry again, nor could he bring any more wives to replace the present ones. It then goes on to say, no matter how much their beauty appeals to you. 33. 52. Whether the aim is to marry or for any other reason, it should always be kept in mind that there must never be the slightest gesture which can arouse any wrong expectations in the mind of the opposite party, because God always knows about your dishonest glances and intentions. 40. 19. Remember, lewdness or immorality does not only refer to wrongdoings concerning sexual intercourse, but the thought or desire of wanting to do so also comes under it, because it basically affects character. The molding of character is, after all, the aim of all restrictions and regulations. What should we do? Now let us consider how the present circumstances should be tackled. Firstly, all the facts written above must have made it quite clear to you as to what the Quran is aiming at in respect of the relationships between men and women. The Quran aims to preserve chastity, both in men and women. After explaining the aim of the Quran, in reply to your question as to what you should do as an individual, I would repeat what Iqbal said to Muslims. O Muslim, consult your own mind and not the clergy. If your query is as to what we should do in our present society to fulfill Quranic tenets, then this is a question which is always very difficult for me to answer. The query boils down to what people do on the basis of their own understanding of Quranic instructions. How should they go about acting upon them in a non-Quranic society? Why this question is difficult to answer is because a Quranic society automatically follows Quranic tenets. That society, with the exception of a few individuals, would consist of people who keenly want to mold themselves according to the Quranic pattern. As such, it would not be difficult to promulgate Quranic laws in such a society. But when the whole society is working on non-Quranic lines, those few who want to follow Quranic directions find it very difficult to do so. For example, take the question of segregation. In a Quranic society, the majority would consider chastity the basic factor in life. Every man would consider it a crime to cast a dishonest glance towards any other woman, and the same would be true of women. In such a society, men and women would be modest and would never eye each other in an unbecoming manner. As regards those who have evil intentions, the society will tackle them in the appropriate manner. Therefore, just as it directed in the above-mentioned lines how women should go out, the Quran also instructs how evil-minded people should be dealt with. The Quran calls these people hypocrites. The hypocrites. The Quranic term for hypocrites is quite comprehensive. It is ascribed for those who are presumable members of the Islamic society, but who disregard its rules and regulations. They are always thinking about how to hoodwink its laws. The Quran asks Momin women to hide their adornments when going out, so that they can be judged as belonging to respectable families. Thereafter it was revealed. If hypocritical people having dirty minds spread rumors and try to shatter the peace of the society, it will become incumbent on the management of the society to take the required deterrent measures. 33. 60. The Quran then states the deterrent measures that should be taken against these people. The first step would be to take remedial measures after isolating them from the society. If such steps do not show any improvement, then they should be deprived of their civic rights and privileges. If they still remain undeterred, then they should be arrested. If after this restriction, they still defy the government, then this would be considered rising against the law, and the revolt would qualify for execution. 33. 61. Then the Quran says that it is nothing new that has been stated. Whenever and wherever a society has been established according to the laws of Allah, the disruptive elements have had to cope with the same kind of laws. This is Allah's practice. Allah generally adheres to this manner. 33. 62. Since the laws of Allah are based on permanent values, one can never experience any change in them. 33. 62. By the way, Tahira, you must have noticed the great value chastity holds in the principles of life. So much so, that preserving chastity has been called a permanent practice of Allah, and these laws are never to be altered. These laws can never be changed, no matter what the circumstances of a particular era. In other words, the sanctity of chastity is a permanent value that cannot be affected by the changes in time. It is just as a permanent value today, as it was 1,000 years ago. Our condition. Such would be the society molded on Islamic lines. Now keep this in mind, and observe your own society. Today the motive for going out is sheer the exhibition of beauty, even if they are devoid of any such attributes. Beauty is a blessing of good health and endures with chastity, and there is a dearth of both of these in our society. Need and errand are either conscious or subconscious excuses. Like the poet who said in his couplet, "Every day I resolve not to go to her house, but every day an errand takes me to that place." If it can be arranged that no man goes towards the roads where these girls and women loiter, spreading the scent of their personalities in the evening, then you will notice that after a few days all their engagements would come to an end, and they would all sit at home vexed. It is mostly due to the enticement by such people, that our youth have become wayward. In circumstances where the hunted ask the hunter to come and get them, then there is no need for a license to hunt. This is how women are. On the other hand, the situation with men is that even if they see a lady walking along the road, without exhibiting herself immodestly, they satisfy their lust by passing the most shameful remarks. As a poet once said, "I recognize the natural styles." Without regard to whether they are educated or uneducated, the youth of the nation are deteriorating in their lack of character. In fact, women of good families find it extremely difficult to go out, not only in their modest coverings but even in closed cars. Furthermore, the educated young men are more forward in this respect. Over and above all this is that class which is supposed to educate our ordinary people in the right direction. The less said about these people, the better. The need for right education. In these circumstances, my daughter, what should I suggest that we do socially? My suggestion for this particular segment is the same as for the other aspects of life. That is, bring a change in your society and build it along the Quranic lines. When your foundation is stable, then the building raised over it will have all its angles and aspects correct. The basic problem relates to education. And education starts at home. It only develops in schools and colleges. As far as basic education is concerned, it is the responsibility of mothers like you who have understood the aim of the Quran and want to act upon it. Schools and colleges come thereafter. The change in such education is beyond either my reach, or yours, and the lack of it is corroding our youth. This education was formulated by a non-Islamic foreign regime to subjugate its people. It did not encompass a solid character, the purity of thought, the sublimity of heart, and the chastity of intentions. This education was prepared on the foundations of waywardness, unclean intentions, and the excitation of base emotions. Along with this education, pornographic literature is flooding the market. Everywhere one can see the immodest hoardings of cinemas. Inside houses you have radios blaring exciting songs that invade your mind. In such an environment, to expect your youth to have pure emotions with their eyes downcast is like wanting to keep brimful glass of water from spilling over, when kept at an angle. The only alternative left with us to stem this volcanic tide is to spread the message of the Quran in our society. I have spent my life in this effort and want to do the same for the rest of my life. I know it is like a drop in the ocean. Or as a poet has expressed, that it is like raising your voice in your quarters. But I keep going. If I can leave behind a few sons and daughters like Salim and Tahira who can keep this tiny flame burning, then I shall feel rewarded enough. Peace be with you. Parwez, November 1953. Talu Islam Trust. 25B, Gulberg 2. Lahore, Pakistan. taluiislam@gmail.com